All right, just hit the power button on there and then turn the floor over to you.
Okay. Thank you. So you guys don't mind if I walk around a little bit, right? Okay. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to just parachute in you guys this morning. We've got a lot of stuff going on, lots of work to do, but I am truly appreciative of this opportunity to spend some time with you this morning and talk about some things that I think we need to discuss in terms of helping understand perhaps some of the frustrations we have out in the field. And I say the field, anytime I leave DC, I consider myself in the field. All right. What questions you may have, concerns. I tell folks up front that this is not about complaining, because we can always find something to complain about, something if we want to. But it's about legitimate concerns you may have that you want us to take back to leaders at the different levels to try to engage on their behalf. All right. I'll also say that this is not my time, this is your time. I think we have about an hour and a half scheduled for this town hall. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I do not have an agenda here today, although you read through the trip schedule. The only thing that I have to do this week is get on my flight Thursday morning. I have to do that. Everything else is flexible, right? But I tell you, this is your time, so we can do whatever you want to do. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. You can ask me any question you want to ask. I will try my best to answer. If I don't have the answer, I'll take a note and we'll figure out who owns it and where, and then we'll get the answer back to you. I have some things I want to talk about, just wave top stuff that I want to share with you, and then we'll get into whatever questions you have. But you can stop me at any time and ask a question as I go through those things that I think is important that you understand. Fair enough? All right. So good morning. Good morning. I think I'm awake. I think I woke up around 2 this morning because of the time difference, right? And so it's been good. So let's see how we start this thing. I do not have slides because I don't think putting up a graphic in front of you necessarily makes the town hall any more interesting than me just talking to you and you with perspective. I do have some questions that I will ask at the end, or at some point during this engagement for context. So I'd like to start explaining who we are as an organization. Not that you don't already know that, right? It's not to insult anybody's intelligence, but I think there is some context that's perhaps lost in who we are as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as it relates to the big army. So our engineer regiment in the Army, with John Spellman at the very top, as in one of his capacities as Chief of Engineers, comprised of 2 legs or arms, as I like to put it. We've got the engineer branch, where we have about 90,000 soldiers, active guard and reserve. Then we have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We have 37,000 or about employees, about 800 of us being soldiers. So those are the 2 arms or legs of the regiment in the Army. The engineer branch, 90,000, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, 37,000. So when we ask ourselves, who are we in the Army, I ask you to just think through that as we have these discussions. So John Spellman wears 3 hats, and I think most of you already know that, but I find that a lot don't as I have these engagements. So he's the Chief of Engineers. He's the commander of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, 2 different titles. And he's also the senior engineer on the Army staff. So 3 hats that he wears on any given day. Very busy individual with those 3 offices, executing those offices. The Office of the Sergeant Major advises the Office of the Commander on everything that affects the workforce, good, bad, or indifferent. That's what my office does. I'm charged to advise the commander on all things affecting the workforce. and also in the other capacities of the other two positions that he's responsible for on the Army staff and then as a chief of engineer. So let's just stick with USACE, because that's where we are, right? So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is who we are, and we're just going to talk about USACE. I believe that there are a couple of things that each of us, 37,000 of us, need to know about the organization, right? Because I believe that if we understand those things, then we understand, one, why we exist, two, why you are important, and three, why what you do is even more important. Because it's about something bigger than any one of us. It doesn't matter who you are, where you work at, where you're from, what your position title is. Every one of us, 37,000 of us, is important. There's a reason why your position exists. There's a reason why your role exists. There's a reason why we have general officers in the Army, like General Spellman, and we have lieutenants. There's a reason why we have senior executive service folks like Mr. Ali over at the headquarters, and then we have wage grade employees at our lots and names. Everybody's role is important. So let's talk about the Office of the Sergeant Major just a little bit. Because I think we just need to do a better job at making sure that folks understand what it does. And I already talked about the advisory role that it has to the commander. But it's more about engagement with the workforce, getting a pulse on the climate, trying to figure out truly how we're doing, you know, when we establish priorities, etc. And then go back to leaders at the different levels, and it could be right here in the district, and get them to see things that they would not otherwise see. I say that I operate in the blind spots of the commanders because they can only be in one place at a time. And each of us operates in somebody's blind spots. So on a day-to-day basis, we see things that our leaders, our supervisors will not otherwise see. And we owe it to them to say, hey, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but here's what's going on in X. Good, bad, or indifferent. And I'm not here looking for bad stuff. I'm here looking for things that we're doing, things that we're not doing, that's preventing you from accomplishing the duties that we ask you to accomplish. And then we take it back. And it could be best practices that you have here in Walla Walla that I can take back and share with Colonel X and say, you might want to share it around the rest of the districts or the enterprise taking it back to headquarters. So 5 things I think each of us need to know about. Our mission being number 1, the vision that the commander has set for the organization being number 2, the priorities being number 3. But most important to the priorities is the intent behind the priorities, being number 4, intent. And then lastly, how General Spellman defined winning for USACE. Chief of Staff of the Army has all his commanders to define winning for the organizations. And General Spellman defined winning as finishing quality projects on time, within budget, and safely. That's winning. If we're doing those things, we'll win. If we're not, then we're not winning. And so let's talk about the priorities that General Spellman has set. The first one being people, second one being readiness, third one being partnership, and the fourth used to be revolutionized, but about 3 weeks ago got changed to innovate. Those are the 4 priorities that General Spellman has set for the organization. Now understand when I'm speaking up here, I'm talking from a headquarters USACE standpoint, and between us and you, there are 2 levels of command, right? And each commander at echelon has that mission, vision, priorities. We got to figure out the intent based on what they tell us. And I think we all kept winning, that winning definition. So based on what my office is charged to do, I spend most of my time operating in the space of the first 2 priorities of people and readiness. That's where I spend my time. I talk about the intent behind those priorities. But what do they really mean? If we do not understand the intent behind the priorities, perhaps we miss everything that General Spellman intends for us to do. So perhaps here's where we can probably get a little bit interactive and probably ask a couple of questions. to see how well we understand those priorities. So when John Spellman says that people is the number one priority, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you as an individual employee? What does that mean to you as a supervisor? What does that mean to you as a deputy district engineer? What does that mean to me as a community sergeant major? What does that mean? What do we think that means when he says people is the number one priority?
Safety.
Safety. But what about safety?
Keeping the people safe so they can do what they need to do.
Keeping people safe. What else?
Morale.
Morale. What about morale?
Makes a really big difference in how the mission is accomplished. It can be done with low morale, but it can be done as well.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. What else? No pressure. I think the reason why I say I think each of us need to understand what those priorities mean is because you have to understand, because how do you know if we're really doing the things that we say we want to do if you don't understand what we're supposed to be doing? Right? So what does that priority of people really mean? How wide and deep does that truly get? So we talked about morale. We talked about safety. What else? Sir?
I think developing people to their greatest potential is really important.
Developing our folks to their greatest potential. All right? What else? I think we're getting there.
Changing the workforce, the way that telework and flexibility with family, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Being flexible with the workforce as it pertains to teleworking, et cetera, et cetera. We're getting there. Treating folks with dignity and respect. Inclusiveness. All right, these are the things that we're talking about, right? So, creating an environment where folks feel safe, respected, treated with dignity. They feel and know that they are valued and contributing members of the team. We are the ones that make you feel that way. If we don't establish those environments, that's on us. As leaders, as teammates, how well do we know each other? Especially if you're a supervisor, how well do you really know your people? How much time do you spend deliberately trying to get to know your folks? Where they're from, like originally. What is life like for them when they're not in the workplace? How well do we know our folks on a personal level versus a professional level? How much time do we spend on that? Do we sit down and talk to our employees? Again, I ask how wide and deep does that one priority of people get? It gets really wide and deep. Because when it comes to taking care of folks, there's just so much that we have to do. And sometimes you got to do it on your own time, outside of the normal operating hours. That's what John Spellman intends with that priority of people. Because we all understand that without our people, nothing happens. Nothing happens. At least not the way we want it to anyways. If we don't treat folks the way we want to be treated, then climate, the environment, everything is just not going to be what it expected to be. So people is truly our number one priority. And I believe that John Spellman truly means that when I talk to him. Because we got to make sure that we provide you everything that you're required to have to execute the duties that we've asked you to execute. So let's talk about readiness. That second priority. What do you think that means? what do we think readiness means?
Ready to respond to any mission that comes our way.
That's being prepared, right?
Yeah.
How do we get prepared?
Training, equipment.
Training and resources. What else?
Being proactive.
Being proactive. What else? I'm looking for a certain aspect of readiness that starts with a P.
Planning, prepare, personnel.
Did you say personnel? It's close.
The right people hired.
Yeah, try another per word. Instead of personnel, personnel. So what about your personal readiness? Are you personally ready to execute that mission, whatever it may be, when it comes up? And what are we talking about here? Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually ready. Are you ready? So we could all agree perhaps that we're at work right now, right? We're all getting paid to do this, so we're at work. But because we're here, does that mean that we're ready? Does that necessarily mean we're ready? We're here because we're supposed to be here. You're supposed to show up, so you did. But are you focused on being here? And this town hall is probably not the right scenario, but just use work in general. So you wake up, you get dressed, and you go to the workplace because you have to be there. But are you completely focused on the task at hand? What could have you not focused on the task at hand? Although you're in the workplace, what are some of the things that could have you not focused?
Family concerns.
Family concerns. What else?
Financial.
Financial. It's a whole host of things that could have you otherwise preoccupied than what you're supposed to be focused on when you show up in the workplace. The fact that you're here doesn't mean that you're ready. It means you showed up because you were supposed to show up. Because you've got bills to pay and you've got kids to feed. But you're struggling and you're suffering otherwise that we don't know about because we don't necessarily make the time to have those conversations or really get to know you. And because we don't do that, we don't establish that trust that is supposed to exist. So when you're having a hard time, you feel comfortable enough to come up to somebody. It doesn't matter who, whether it's a teammate or a supervisor, and say, I'm having some difficulties. I need some help. And more importantly, can we identify when Toussaint walks into the room or to work on a day that something is not right? Something in his behavior changed. This is not the norm with Toussaint. And then if we do identify that, then who asks a question to Toussaint? We try to see what's going on with him. Because I'll tell you as a supervisor, whether it's you identifying or a teammate identifying and bring it to your attention, perhaps there's a discussion that needs to be had. Because you may end up having to tell Toussaint to take some leave or take the rest of the day off, regardless of how much work you have to do, so he can get those issues resolved. I always think about the employee or the soldier with kids. I used to be a dual military couple when we first started off. We had a daughter. For some reason, the Army could never get this right. The daycare opened at the exact same time that was supposed to be at PT formation. The exact same time. So somebody had to drop the brat off to the daycare, right? This is no different here. If you have, and what if you're a single parent? Is it important for you to know that as a supervisor about your employees? And if they're single parents, how many kids do they have? And do any of the kids have special needs? Now, I'll tell you, those are the things when we talk about people and their readiness that John Spellman wants us to hone in on. Because if we can get people and readiness right, I think all of the other priorities fall into place. That's huge, to get the people and readiness aspect of it right. And then there is partnership, right? All he's asking us to do is at our levels to build those relationships that are necessary to keep us to get to our end state. And each of us engage in some way, shape, or form with our stakeholders or customers or partners on some level of frequency. And he expects us at our levels to have good relationships. Relationships built on trust, but not just trust, but mutual trust. Because we're all after the same end state. And then the last priority of innovate, change from revolutionize, is asking us to look at our systems, our processes, our policies that we have in place, and figure out what if they need to be changed, and what are those changes we need made so we can get after this business that we've got going on. We've got a massive program that we have to deliver. You guys know better than I. We have a very small workforce in relation to that program. So what John Spellman is telling us, it cannot be business as usual. We've got to get creative. We've got to think outside the box. We've got to figure out if it's a system or a process typically has 12 steps. Do we need all 12 steps? Can we get to the end state with 5 steps instead of 12? And oh, by the way, if there is a policy or a process or a system, who created it? Is it necessary? Or is it just because I can write it up, so I send it in? Who created that policy? Who even knows it exists other than yourself, the one who wrote it? And then why? Is it creating efficiencies for us, or is it creating more issues? Those are the things that John Spellman is asking us to look at. So those 4 priorities of people, readiness, partnerships, and innovate, I believe any discussion that we have, not just today, but in general, about anything as it pertains to the program, our workforce, whether folks feel like they're valued or not, whether we're winning or not, we can tie any discussion we have back to one of those priorities on whether somebody somewhere understands or does not understand the intent behind the priority. Because it's easy to just say no. This is how we've always done it. We don't like change. We're not going to change. But if we understand the intent, we will not say no. We will figure out how we get to that yes or that happy compromise. Any discussion we have, we can tie back to whether we understand or not understand the intent under this priorities. So that's why I believe it's important that each of us understand those things. Because the better we understand it, the better we understand why we exist and why what we do is important. And how, doesn't matter who you are. You know, you hear folks say, oh, I'm just whatever. You're not just anything. There's a reason why you're there. And what you do, big or small, has strategic implications that you may not be aware of. And we need to make sure you understand that. So I'll pause and see if I have any questions on John Spellman's priorities.
Why did you choose to change to innovate instead of revolutionize?
Right, so there was some questions about, well, you know, that was a carryover one from John Semonite, and revolutionize just sounds like this age stuff. And as we try to get really funding for our R&D programs as well, because we didn't really get any funding for that, and he's making a big push on funding for R&D. Just thought it fit better, right? That we're more creative, that we can think of how we sit together in a room or wherever we may be and come up with those things that helps us really get after the technology and everything else that we've got going on. But that was it. It's just a change of word and that aligns better with today. Right? So that's the change. It makes everybody feel like they're a part of it as well. What else? Okay. This happens all the time. Sir.
I'll ask an uncomfortable question. We talk about people and readiness, people feeling valued and being able to focus on their work from readiness. Over the last couple of years, something that has gotten in the way of that, of some people feeling valued and able to focus on their job, was the COVID mandate. And I'd like just for you to speak on that and how you reconcile General Spelman's 2 priorities and that mandate.
Okay, so General Spelman's 4 priorities.
Well, those 2
okay.
specifically related to that. Sorry, you're right. He has 4.
Gotcha. So you said you're going to ask the uncomfortable question, right? I believe that we live in an environment, in a world today where we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's just me. We got to be comfortable being uncomfortable because just about every discussion we have is an uncomfortable one. Whether it's the COVID vaccine or just you looking an employee in the eyes and letting them know they're not performing to standard. All right, so let's get with the mandate, right? What we did at headquarters USACE and across the enterprise when this thing came out, first of all, the mandate is what it is. But we got to understand that. We've got to accept that. That's Toussaint speaking, right? The mandate is what it is. We followed every protocol and policy that came from the administration down to DOD and then down to Department of Army as they sat on it and tried to figure out what the way ahead was, right? None of that stuff was created by USACE. That's what we got to make sure we understand. Whether we agree or not agree with what that mandate was, it's something we had to execute, period, as a command. So remember when I started off, I talked about the Army and the Engineer Regiment? I do this for a reason. And the two arms that we have, the branch soldiers and then the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Mandate is what it is. At the end of the day, it's a requirement that we have. Whether you're a soldier or you're Department of Army civilian. And you have a choice. You have an option to get the vaccine or not get the vaccine. Based on those options, there are consequences that come with those choices you make. That's it. That's it. We did everything that we thought we could necessarily do to keep the workforce safe and allow folks the opportunity to get vaccinated. We encourage getting vaccinated. I do encourage it. But at the same time, there is also a process that allows you to request for an exemption if that fits what you've got going on. And that's what that process is. You request the exemption, whether it's a medical or religious accommodation, and we went through that process. Now, I think everybody understands that that stuff is at a halt right now. And again, this is not us. This is just where we're at. Here's what I can tell you about those exemptions. We've got about 3,700 of those things at headquarters USACE. We went through the entire process of getting the subject matter expert panel trained. And that week, when we're gonna start executing those reviews was when we got the halt and everything is out of stock. So right now, if you have an exemption in, it's just sitting and waiting for that decision to be made in the courts, right? But everything we've executed is in line with guidelines that we have. So I had an employee at a district ask or say, well, Sergeant Major, to your point of the things you identified, people, readiness, valued members of the team. It's not that we don't value you. We value, and I value your opinion. And I respect the choice that you make, but it's a choice that you make. I don't see you any differently if you choose to get vaccinated or not get vaccinated. That's your choice, right? But he said, Sergeant Major, well, I don't think you guys care about us, about the workforce. I said, well, I don't agree with that. I said, why would you say that? He said, because you talk about compassion and you talk about all this other stuff, yet you want me to get vaccinated. I encourage you to get vaccinated. I don't care if you get vaccinated or not. If you do, great. If you don't, again, that's a choice. And he said, well, John Spellman could easily say that no employee in the USACE is going to get the vaccine. So kind of the reason why I always start off with explaining who we are. And I said, you are correct. He can say that. But tomorrow, there'll be a new commander of USACE telling you to get the vaccine. Just is what it is. Personal choices. I'm not mad at you for whatever your decision is. But that's what we have to do, right? It's a mandate. Whether you agree with it, you drive on with what your preference is. I have family members that refuse to get vaccinated. I don't hate them. They're still my cousins and stuff like that. But just some discussions I won't have with them because it just is what it is, right? We got to accept that stuff because it just, again, you make a choice. And he told me, he said, Swami, you're not giving me a choice or an option. I said, yeah, you do. To get vaccinated or not get vaccinated. It's the option. So we've got soldiers who have been separated from the army for not getting the vaccine already. And folks were frustrated with the process of the exemptions. Well, on the soldier side, it was easy, right? It just went up, got denied, you had a choice whether you wanted to continue or not, and then we started separating people out, right? And that's the difference on this side where we've got to make sure. And I think that's what the Secretary of the Army did when she sat on a lot of that stuff, is try to make sure we got it right. Because every time we put something out and we try to execute it, it's like, oh, we didn't think about this, and we have to go back into that process. So, I mean, we do apologize for the confusion that it caused and the stress that is brought, but at the end of the day, personal choices and options is what those are. I hope that helps. I said a lot there, but I hope that helps. Sir?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to just expand a little bit and narrow the focus of the question a little bit. Thanks, sir. First off, thank you for coming, Walla.
I'm listening.
The mandate came with it. Obviously, a lot of stress, a lot of angst throughout the organization. I think across the enterprise got that. When the injunctions came forward, though, a lot of that stuff was put on pause, like you said, and fully respecting the fact that this was all well above General Spellman and whatnot, and it's just the situation we have. One thing that was never lifted was this travel restriction for our unvaccinated employees. And I am not totally clear on the numbers of what that 3,700 is representative of, but for Walla Walla, that's somewhere 5 to 10% of our workforce. I think we've got a higher number than some other districts that have filed exemptions. And that kind of put them in this limbo indefinitely. We don't have an end state. And so what we're doing as a district right now that I feel like I want to share with you is trying to understand the impacts of those restrictions. Now I understand the Pentagon has its opinion on what mission critical travel looks like, and that it's reasons for national security, natural disasters, etc. But for a district at our level, the definition of mission critical is completely different. I mean, it's a lot lower maybe to what the Pentagon views. We have staff members that can't get their Title 36 citation authority. We can't run entire training programs because it requires them to travel. It's really putting 5 to 10% of our workforce in this second-class citizen status because there's no answers. I guess the question I've got, or maybe an opening for you to maybe talk further on is, what degree of engagement at the leadership level are we having with our higher headquarters at the Department of Army, Pentagon anyways, to help us with this? Because as this goes on, it really impairs our ability to be ready to execute our mission and take care of our people. And I think to what Matt was asking, I think that's our concern is how do we get through this, especially when everyone around us in society is traveling freely now, there's no masks for the most part, et cetera. It seems to have a lot of impacts on our morale, et cetera. So turn it back to you.
Yeah, great question and great way to narrow it down. I would tell you that it's a shared concern, right? John Spellman has the same concern that you have with this travel restriction. Again, it goes back to that's just part of that rule. So we've gone back to headquarters DA and the Secretary of the Army's office and asked, right? There is a process in place that if you have folks with critical mission requirements, that we send that request up to headquarters, has to be validated, justified, you tracking all of that. That's the process. Right now, I think the new Undersecretary of the Army been in office for about a month now, right? And he's looking at what he does. And we're hoping that we get that delegation down to John Spellman so he can execute those things at his level. Right now, we still have to send outside of USACE to the under. It's just a process. I'm dealing with a situation right now with a kid in Israel that's trying to PCS. And because of that process, and he's not vaccinated, then technically we cannot pay for him to leave Israel until we get an exemption or waiver from the Undersecretary of the Army, right? I don't think it's an issue once it gets there, but that's the process that we have to go through. And until they clear that up, it's just, we don't have control over that, right? We feel the same frustration. And I'll tell you, every one of those requests that come up to John Spellman, he signs off on, approves, back up to the head on his office. Right? But that's just where we're at. Again, I mean, I don't have probably the answer you're looking for. We can't tell you to travel, but that's one of the restrictions. We're hoping it gets lifted, right? And the other thing is we as an organization, as Department of Army, civilians and even soldiers right now, right? So soldiers who are unvaccinated cannot leave. They cannot PCS, they cannot go TDY, they can't do anything right now. They're there. They're on wherever they're at. Right? So until this exemption thing gets
Sergeant Major, COVID is probably one of the single most commonly asked questions that I get, and the travel piece being, chief among those. Today's my first day back after 2 weeks of leave. Thank you for letting me have some time off. But as you know, right, the email doesn't stop coming. And so I do see traffic, and some of it is about traveling for unvaccinated personnel. So I have not had an opportunity to digest a lot of the email that I've received, but just on a topical review, I would tell you that I think that the winds of change are starting to blow, and I make no promises here that we're going to receive the unrestricted travel that we would all like pre March 2020, but at the OPM level, there are conversations that are happening. Once I have an opportunity to do some more research and get guidance, right, we're going to have to get it from Army, DOD to Army to USACE, and then eventually from the MSC down to us. I think we'll learn a little bit more. But to your point, and I know because that is the single most commonly asked question that I get, I think change is coming. Change in the core, like the rest of our government apparatus, happens slowly, but I'm starting to see the gears slowly start to turn.
This is not a Walla Walla issue. This is enterprise wide. So, ma'am.
Lest you think that we all feel the same here, I would point out that we are like the rest of society. And I would just like to point out, I would not be sitting here if I was not completely vaccinated and boosted. And I get that we have some efficiency issues going on with this inconsistency, and I respect that. But I would like to also speak for the fact that I think that caring for people and readiness also is reflected in some of these precautions we've been taking, including vaccination and masking. I know it's not easy for everybody to do it, but I just want to sort of add my voice to this on behalf of others who are basically observing it from a different perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that was the first thing, right? It's we put things in place, whether it was mass telework that was offered, right? To allow folks that space to take care of the workforce, right? And to your point, then the vaccine is just another step in that. And again, whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, you choose to get vaccinated or not, it's about us as leaders doing what we think is necessary to protect the workforce. And that's what that is. And so hopefully we see some of those things lifted soon because we understand the impact. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you today that I encourage you to get vaccinated. That's Toussaint's perspective, right? Whatever you choose to do, again, is up to you for whatever the reasons. Yeah, if you have legitimate reasons why you can't get vaccinated, I have zero problems with that, right? And that's what the exemptions are for. Unfortunately, we're at a halt with those things. It's just worrisome. So did you have something?
Yes, Sergeant Major, just about the consistency. I mean, we talk, this is more in the readiness. I've been concerned for, the last couple of months when we start coming back to the workplace. The consistency of telework, remote work across the enterprise, and how that affects. Is there going to be any additional guidance from specifically headquarters USACE on, remote? It seems to me that there might be a blind spot at headquarters that, opening all these remote positions is going to really affect the readiness in the field. And I don't know if there's been discussion about that at the headquarter level in terms of one, telework consistency, and then this whole new remote jobs in the Corps.
So help me when you say inconsistency, what exactly you getting at? Just so I have better context.
Well, for like telework, I think within our division, we moved out pretty quickly on coming back where other districts aren't. I don't know that we're going to have a lot of, and I'm the district counselor, so maybe my consistency is looking at my COP, but the consistency of remote positions nationwide, I just don't see districts, even for attorney positions, if you're going to be a attorney-client relationship, you have to be present. And that means more than just virtual. And I'm not seeing, I'm not seeing any consistency. I'm seeing that depending on where you're located, maybe what the winds are, maybe out here, we opened up things earlier than some people I know in Seattle and Portland. And, those consistencies can have ripple effects.
Okay. So to answer your question up front in regards to whether, and do we have blind spots? Absolutely. But I don't think that's a blind spot for us. Because I think we see that one clearly. General Spellman, we're not going to issue any additional guidance on this workplace transformation. And the reason is because it's written in such a way where it's wide open for you as a supervisor to make those decisions. We've given you maximum flexibility at your level to make those decisions from a headquarters policy standpoint. Right? General Spellman is not telling you when you telework or when you remote work. So I'll just share with you that as we thought about post-COVID operations and workplace transformation, we're trying to figure out what that looked like. We had a couple of sessions at the headquarters that included some folks from the districts and the divisions that we would meet on a monthly basis before we release the workplace transformation policy. What was supposed to happen was we were supposed to look at our INDs or TDAs, whatever you want to reference, or the people, your many documents, and identify on those documents the positions that were remote work eligible and telework eligible. Not people, but positions. And we're supposed to code them as such. You got to make that decision, not us, right? At the district level, at the division levels, we're supposed to identify those positions that were remote work eligible. And to your point, lawyer or counsel-client relationship, that has to happen in person. Well, Mr. Cooper or whoever got to decide whether a position is remote. We didn't do that. As far as telework goes, OPM's guidance is that at a minimum, 1 day per pay period, you have to come to the workplace if you're teleworking. That's the minimum requirement. Again, that's an agreement between employee and the supervisor as to how often that supervisor have them come in. We don't hold that up at headquarters, you say. So if the divisions did something that they held it, or the district headquarters held it, then that's, all guidance is clear and really, really flexible to allow supervisors to make those decisions. And that's how John Spellman wanted it to be, and that's how he's gonna keep it. Because folks are concerned about, well, you know, you're remote working and I can't get a hold of you. This is a condition that you have in that contract with your folks. I was at the district the other day and I said, oh, Sergeant Major, this guy's remote working and he's a different time zone. So we lose 3 hours on each end of the day because he shows up based on his time zone. Why is that? If you hire that person remotely, it doesn't matter where they're at. The condition is that you work on my time zone and schedule. That's just leadership, engagement, and figuring out what you want it to be. Because there are positions that can remote work, but not all. There are positions that can telework, and we know that better than most. With all lock operators, right, or rangers out there throughout the pandemic, always at work. That's not lost on us. But as an enterprise, we also realize that we're in a war for talent as well. And we have to be able to compete. So like last week, I was asked by Sergeant, why don't we just get rid of telework and get rid of remote work? We can absolutely do that. But we'll be left behind. I'm competing for the same folks that every other agency is out there competing for. And so I have to use those tools that are available to me to make sure that I can get the talent that I need in U6. We just have to manage that at the different levels. So I feel that and inconsistencies. So I told the folks at headquarters, like, you don't even have to go outside of headquarters USAs to have these discussions. Meal programs versus civil works. Same floor, same building, different telework policies. So you've got folks angry because they're doing something different. You can't get angry at that, because that's a supervisor that's supposedly done an analysis and figured out what they can accept as a risk and not. So I don't care if you have 2 individuals that work for the same supervisor. Their telework agreements may be different if you allow them to telework that. Because you can, 1, count on this guy more than you can the other, and 2, their duties are different and requirements may be different. And so we have to be able to have these discussions and explain to folks, it's not a us versus them like I hear in the field all the time. It's just something that I have to take advantage of as an enterprise so I can keep competitive with this workforce, right? Hope that helps. Gentleman told me that 2 weeks ago, Sergeant John, old school. I believe if you're at work, you need to be in the building. Well, you've got an issue, because we can't think that way. The mindset that you're only working if I can see you, it's got to go away. Because I will tell you that in my experience, when I walk around some headquarters, I see the same guy or gal, always away from the desk, not necessarily talking about work, but they're there. How much work are we really getting from them? And I think that the individuals who give you 110% every day in the building gives you 100 and maybe 20% every day teleworking. And the same individuals that didn't do much of anything in the building continues to do not much teleworking. That's when you're not supposed to know your people. You're supposed to know your employees. And you get to make that decision whether that position teleworks or not. You do. Now, folks say, well, sorry, Major, that's not fair, and I'll go to EO and EEO. Well, it's a decision that an employee has to make. We can't be scared to make decisions just because we're worried about if somebody's gonna go make a complaint. That's what that process is there. All right, but we've got to be able to lead. Hope that helps a little bit, sir. Yeah, we cannot not allow folks to telework or remote work as an enterprise. We have to be able to do that. Okay, so let me share with you real quickly my leadership philosophy as I try to support and advocate and share and make sure that we're in line with John Spellman's priorities and the intent behind the priorities. So, and I would offer that if you're a leader in the room or you aspire to be a leader and you don't have a leadership philosophy, to probably think about having one. Because I think it helps guide us day to day on what we do, or at least what we want to do to keep us kind of in line. So I think when you were company commander, you were told you had to have a leadership philosophy, right? And you probably still have the same one.
It's adapted over time.
Adapted over time. But they make that a requirement for us. So when I became a first sergeant, the battalion commander said, hey, first sergeant, do you have a leadership philosophy? I'm like, nope. So you need to have one. So I went to my company commander, I asked, do you have a leadership philosophy? And he said, I do. I got his, changed a couple of words, and bam, there was Toussaint's leadership philosophy. That's what it was. It was about a page long. Didn't remember it, couldn't talk about it, right? And over time, folks are like, you need to narrow this thing down, right? So about the past 10, 15 years or so, I've been using the word people as an acronym for my leadership philosophy. I think it's simple. I believe in it for one, and I can talk about it. So as I go through this, I want you to keep those things I talked about, each of us employees being able to or need to know about USACE. Mission, vision, priorities, intent, and the definition of winning. And you can think about your district mission, vision, priorities, right? You should know those at least, right? If not John Spellman's. Because what's important to all of those things is they're supposed to be nested all the way up. So, the piece for passion. I believe that we need to be passionate about what we do. Because it gives us that motivation to wake up and show up every day. And if you're passionate about something, what is it and why? I will tell you that going around the enterprise and engaging with the workforce, I have not seen a shortage of passion in our employees. But regardless of how many times we agree to disagree on certain topics, the subjects, at the end of the discussion, it's always, I love working for this organization. I enjoy my job. But we certainly can do better in some areas, but that passion is there. And as I tried to understand that passion when I first joined USACE, because I was trying to figure out why is it so much different for Department Army civilians versus us as soldiers. And then I realized that these projects, like the ones I'm going to drive to this afternoon and tomorrow, you guys really understand why those things exist. And if those things don't work, the implications with that. And what I notice is that as a soldier, you send me anywhere to do whatever business and then I come back. That's why I always ask folks when I talk to them, where are you from originally? Are you from the local area? Because you'll find that these are the gatekeepers of those projects. And they do everything that they have to do to make sure it works. That's that different level of passion that I've witnessed. And then the E is for empowerment. I believe that we should allow our employees to know that they are empowered to make decisions that are their level to make. You assess the risk. If you own that risk, we want you to make the decision. That's what I believe. You've got to know that there is not enough time in the day for you to ask. Every time there's a decision to be made, can I, may I, should I? Assess the risk. If it's at your level, make the decision. Because the O is for ownership. And when you're empowered and you make those decisions, then I want you to own everything that comes with that. Good, bad, or indifferent. Because it's yours. It's not his or hers, it's yours. I want you to own it. Because I want to believe that when you make that decision, you made it in the best interest of your people or of the mission. With the information and resources you had at the time. You made the best decision that you think you can make at the time. I don't believe that anybody wakes up, I hope not. Anybody wakes up, puts on the uniform, all clothes, gets dressed, gets a cup of coffee, gets into the car and say, yep, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna screw this thing up today. As bad as I can. Intentionally. I don't think any of us do that. I think most people want to come to work and do the right thing. Here's what the issue is. It's that life happens. And you make a decision and it doesn't always work out. That's okay. But we have to tell you it's okay. That's where leadership comes into play. When you make a decision and it goes sideways, we're supposed to have your back. We're supposed to try to figure out what happened, why it happened, and how do we prevent it from happening again in the future? Not start pointing blame. That's what typically happens. Everybody pulls out, and we feed whoever that individual is to the wolves. That's not what leadership is about. Because I have to ask myself, do I own some of that problem as a leader? What if I had the resources of information that you needed? And I passed this down to you, would you have made a different decision? And if the answer is yes, then I own some of that as well. It's a shared ownership. And I have to hold myself accountable for not providing you those things. But again, even realizing that I was part of that problem, I still point fingers 110% at you. Guess what happens tomorrow, next week? You never make another decision. That's not what we want. So it's okay if something doesn't work out. Let's sit down, talk about it, hold you accountable if that's what needs to happen. But whenever we talk about accountability, there's always this negative connotation to it right up front. And accountability could be just you and I sitting down and having a conversation, just try to figure out what happened. And the most important part of this thing are the lessons learned with that event. And how do we share those with others so they don't make the same mistakes? That's what we're supposed to do, have your back. That's what Toussaint believes. Then the other piece for purpose. What is your purpose? Why do you exist as a human being in general? I'm going to ask you to answer that. But why do we exist? Mission, vision, priorities, intent, and the definition of winning. Why do we have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers? How many countries have a Corps of Engineers, you think? Other countries? Everybody wants one. And they ask us how we do it. What's the whole purpose? Why do we exist? Why do we have the mission that we have on behalf of this nation? Why your division? Why this district? Why the projects that we have folks standing guard on? Why us? Why you? Why me? What is your purpose? Why do you wake up every day and show up? And the L is for loyalty. I believe that's important. Loyalty to the families we left at home before we came to work this morning, to our teammates, to our supervisors, to our district, to our partners, stakeholders, customers. I want you to think about loyalty in a different context this morning. I tell folks that when I think of loyalty in the execution of my duties as a Command Sergeant Major, I do not see myself being loyal to General Spellman. And everybody looks at me like, man, that's kind of messed up. It's not. I see myself as being loyal to the office of the commander, not to the individual occupying the office, but to the office. And it doesn't matter who the commander is. That's what the loyalty is to. The commander. It doesn't matter if it's Toussaint or Jones or Spell, it doesn't matter. And based on the discussion thus far, who else do you think my office is supposed to be loyal to? And this one is not rhetorical. Yeah, but based on the discussions I've had so far. The people, right? The workforce. Not individuals in the workforce, but the workforce. So I have to be able to take whatever concerns you have, good, bad, or indifferent, and take them back to the office of the commander with zero hesitation. I believe if my loyalty is to General Spellman and not the commander, it's not easy to go back and tell him we suck if we're sucking. Because I don't want to hurt his feelings, or whatever the case may be, because we probably have a good relationship, and I don't want to affect that. But if I cannot do that, then I'm also not doing that part of it. So I ask folks to look at that loyalty more as the other Army value of duty. The obligation that we have to do the right thing. We have got to be able to look folks in the eyes and tell them the truth. It's not personal, it's business. It's what we're supposed to do. And they'll be better off for it someday. And I use my office and General Spellman's office, but if you're a supervisor in here, you do occupy an office that you're supposed to execute every day. And if you don't understand the difference between loyalty and duty and when you apply which one, you're probably going to get it wrong. And we talk about workforce and the command climate surveys that we do each year in the FEBS. The top thing always is we do not do well at taking care of poor performers every year. It's in there. That's because we do not have the courage to look folks in the eyes and let them know when they're not doing right. Because we're worried about hurting their feelings. We're worried about whether they're going to talk to me tomorrow. And we shouldn't be. And I understand in these districts and communities and workplaces, we've got folks that have worked together forever. And you build these relationships. And those are great. We want you to have those. But I also expect you to know that you're a leader, and some days I need you to lead and not be a friend. And so you need to be able to understand when you apply that duty versus loyalty. And it's okay for me to tell you, hey, you're not cutting it. It's just, I know you're a great guy, you're doing a lot of great things. And for that reason, I'm gonna have to put you in a pit. As soon as you say pit, it's like, oh, you're trying to get rid of me. It's not the intent behind the pit. The pit is to help you improve so we can keep you on, not to get rid of you, but you got to do your part. But anytime we say pit, it's already negative. And nobody wants to go down that route. So what do? We just keep passing him along to the next person. And because we don't make that time during the rating year to really tell you how you're doing, come 31 March, I have to give you a 3 or a 2. Can't give you a 1 because I never did my part. And that's where everybody sees that, man, everybody knows Toussaint's just not doing his job. So how does he get the same rating? And then you get the same award that everybody else gets? You need to be able to do this. Look folks in the eyes and have honest conversations with them. It's not just COVID and other things that we can be uncomfortable with. I say this all the time. We're uncomfortable being comfortable enough to have a discussion with somebody about their performance. We got to get beyond that. Now, please, do not walk away from this town hall thinking I'm not loyal to General Spelman, because I am. But in executing my duties in this office, I have to be able to tell him the truth. Whether he wants to hear it or not. In the East for empathy, I, Toussaint, personally do not believe that we can be good human beings if we cannot be empathetic. Hence, if we cannot be empathetic, we can't be good leaders. Now, we can fake that funk forever. But I believe that someday, whether big or small, whatever that issue is going to show its ugly head. Because you're just not going to care about somebody else's problems because it's not yours. Remember I talked about how well we know all people? Remember I talked about that single parent with 3 kids, one of them has special needs? Now you're the supervisor for that person. Remember when I talked about my wife and I having to go to daycare at the same time for PT formation? Well, there was somebody that allowed me to miss the formation so I could drop the brat off to the daycare. They didn't have to do that, but they did. So say your employee comes to you and say, hey, I just, same situation, right? Can we flex left or right 15 minutes so I can drop the kids off? You're a supervisor, you get to make that decision. You're empowered to make that decision at your level. You can say yes or you can say no. You can tell them, it's not my problem, it's your problem. When I hired you, I did not hire your kids. So you figure it out. The only thing I care about is that you show up at 0730 like you're supposed to. So don't bring your drama to the workplace. Leave that stuff at the house. Now, how ready do you think that individual is when they show up? You tie it all back to the beginning, right? They're not ready, they're there. And how do you think your climate over time is going to be? It's bad. It's not a conducive environment where people feel like you care about them, and you have their best interests at heart. And what if you do that one thing? And people say, well, so Major, if I do it for one, I have to do it for everybody else. No, you don't. Everybody's situation is different. That's why leadership is an art. And you got to be able to work that out. And the person who believes that they're supposed to get the same stuff too, then you have that honest conversation with them. That's it. That empathy is huge, I believe. If we cannot do that, we're gonna have some problems. So I always ask folks, just put yourself in those shoes of that person. What if that were you? Ask yourself the question, what if that were me? What would my expectations of my leaders be reasonably, right? It's got to be reasonable. What would my expectations be? Because I'll say this again. When we say that you say sucks as an organization, that we do not care about people, we don't take care of them, I'm not saying that you say that, but say we do. Or the division, or the district. I always ask folks, how are things in your team, in your section? Do people want to come to work because they work for you? Because they don't see John Spellman every day. They don't see Colonel Van Epps every day. But they see you. And are they excited when they wake up in the morning just because they work for you? They can't wait to leave home and come home? That's how that's supposed to be. Now, we're not perfect, right? It's a family, so we're going to have issues and we work those out. But we have to set those conditions. We've got to make folks feel that way and know that we genuinely care. Because they will also see right through us if we're not genuine about it. Again, it's going to show its ugly head at some point. So I think empathy, again, is critical. And that's my leadership philosophy, kind of like in a nutshell. And I do really believe you're good employees. But that's just some of the stuff I wanted to share with you. We'll take some questions, comments, concerns. What's on your mind? We can go from there.
I'd like to ask the AV team if there's any questions on the YouTube. Nothing? Okay.
So our society has been through a lot in the last 3 years. Politics, COVID, economy, war in Ukraine, all things are going on at the same time. It seems as though people are tired. They're moving past thinking about things and doing things. Whether it be, hey, I'm going to retire 3 years early. I'm going to move across the country because my family is there and I've always wanted to do it. I'm going to go into a nightclub and cause problems. People are in an action mode, and it makes me worried about how I keep my people safe. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's huge, sir. That's a lot to unpack. Yeah, let's see. Because you said a lot there that I don't have control of. Neither do you. Right? I think what we need to do personally, right? This is just Toussaint speaking, is figure out the things we have control of. What can we affect? What can we impact? Get all of the information that you need to know about whatever it is you're trying to have a discussion about. Don't concern yourself too much with what you don't control. I just believe sometimes we reach so high up and worry about things that there are things like right under our feet that we need to take care of. I think the bigger world, politics, COVID, I believe in God. I'm just gonna say that. I do drink wine, but I believe in God. And I believe he has a plan. Why does he allow those things to happen? I ask myself that question all the time. When I look at Ukraine as an example, why is this happening? If there is a God, why is he allowing it to happen? Right? That's how I look at things. But I try to figure out what are those things that I can do to take care of mine, to keep them as safe as I can, to inform them the best that I can, to help them make the best decisions that they can make, and to always remind folks that they have options, choices. And when you find yourself in a situation, do not suffer in silence. Find somebody that you bring your concerns up to early enough. And we've got to communicate with more people early and often. Early and often, we've got to communicate. We got to keep them informed because things are going to happen. I was talking to one of my friends who was going through a divorce, and he was in court trying to get visitation rights for his kids. And he called me up and he said, hey, I just want you to know that I just got a different perspective on life sitting in that courtroom. It was right shortly after that shooting with the kids in Texas. He said, here I am fighting my wife, soon to be ex-wife, for visitation rights. And there are parents that will never see their kids again. I'm going to be able to get to see my kid at some point. Right? So things happen in life that just gives us different perspectives. And I don't get involved in politics. I just try to do my job. I just try to do what I think is right. And there's a lot going on that I ask myself, why can't we just come to a happy compromise? And I'll use this a simple example for you, because I get this every week. The limits on our government purchase cars, whether it's for services, supplies, the limits. Those things were set forever ago. And in good faith. But $2,000 forever ago, but a lot. It does not today. So we've gone back and asked for the limits to be raised so many times just to keep up with today. The problem is, it is such a political issue, believe it or not, that you have one side who wants to get rid of it entirely, and the other side who is saying no. And we cannot realize the impact. Just pause and stop to realize the impact that this is having. And all we have to do is raise the limits. We're not asking you to change the law, just raise the limits to keep up with inflation and everything else. That's how bad politics is. All right? It just makes stuff really hard for us at the end user level. Right? So I think it's about perspective, understanding again what's within your control. What are the things you can do to help your team, your family, right? Your community, and just stay vigilant the best that you can. I don't know if that helps, but what else? Okay, how are we doing on recognizing folks, awards, recognitions as a district? Do we do well here at that? Yeah. Okay. I don't think we do well as an enterprise. That's why I asked the question. I think we do well at end of year when we do DP maps and everybody gets their performance awards. I think we do well in spot awards and cash awards, but honorary awards, I think we suck at. We have a really good program, awards and recognition program, but we don't use it. And I say we don't use it because when I run into employees that have worked for USAID for upwards of 25 years and have never received an honorary award, I ask myself, is this a really horrible employee? And if that's the case, why are they still there? And in 25 years, we could not find some time, if that's a great employee, to say thank you. We don't do a good job at that as an enterprise. Maybe your district does it well, but not as an enterprise. How are we doing on information getting to you? Information flow. You think you get all the information that you need to have? Kind of, sort of, maybe, maybe not. Sometimes. What are we tracking about the civilian fitness program? Is everybody tracking that there is a civilian fitness program? Yeah. When did we find out about it? Yeah, but when did we find out about it? About a month ago? That's consistent across the districts. Oh, it's not new. This thing's been around forever. Yes, sir, it has. In fact, when I was the Command Sergeant Major at the Pacific Ocean Division, I ran that program in 2018 for the staff, the headquarters staff. And it was there before that as well. So what changed last year was the old program limited you to only a 6-month one-time deal. That's what changed. So in the old program, you were able to sign up for the program not to exceed 6 months, and it was a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Again, arrangement between you and your supervisor. That's how you did that. So last February, it changed when we got rid of the 6-month one-time deal. You should have already known that. But we don't do a good job at communicating and informing our people. I think that's huge because folks are asking for it. So let's see what else is not getting out here. We just talked about recognition. We're familiar with the federal pins that we give for service. 5, 10, 15. Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah.
Are we getting them?
Yeah.
On time? Give or take. I think the norm was to wait till core day and present them. But we haven't had a core day in 2 years. So what happened to that 10-year pin that's now 12 years? Or what happens when we give a 10-year pin at the 20-year mark? I'm not making this up. Had a frustrated employee just eyeing me down the entire time I was talking. It's like, sir, is everything okay? It's like, actually, Sergeant Major, it's not. So what's the issue? Well, I just went over 40 years last year. It's like, thanks for your 40 years of service. It's like, that's my point. So why have I not received my 40-year pin yet? It's a big deal to him. It's supposed to be. Right? But we are the ones that make folks feel the way they feel. So awards are supposed to be timely. You say, I don't want it anymore because it fits the purpose. I'm at 41 years now. I'm supposed to get my 40-year pin at the 40-year mark. So these are the federal pins that I'm talking about. What do you guys know about the Army service lapel pins for DA civilians?
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it.
It's interesting. So 2018, Secretary of Army approved these pins for Army-specific service. There's an Army directive that was sent out in 2018, October of 2018, to the force. There are 3 orders of the pin: the bronze, silver, and gold. It was a retention thing when the Sec Army signed that. The bronze pin we're supposed to give to employees at the 12-month mark. Thanking them for joining the team, telling them how much we value them and what they bring, and tell them how much we want them to stay. And he or she goes, oh my God, this is so cool. Start crying, never want to leave and stuff like that. And then you give them the pin. And then at 10 years, we give them the silver pin. Same thing, right? You've been with us for 10 years and we appreciate you. And then the gold pin is retirement. Unlike the federal pin where you have to justify 30 years of service, the gold pin is just a retirement pin. 2018 was when this directive was sent out. This is not an option. This is something we're supposed to be doing. But you don't know what you don't know, right? 30 years in the Army, here's what I found out. There are things we know, there are things we don't know, and there are things we don't know we don't know. Like you just didn't know that you didn't know that that pin existed. But now we know. So what do we do about it? It's like winning, right? We're not winning if we're not doing these things. Say finishing quality projects on time, within budget, but safely. All of that is tied into that. There are the specified things that the chiefs ask us to do, and there are the implied things that we're supposed to just do. You cannot make an omelet without eggs, I don't think. It's not an omelet. But if I ask you to make an omelet, I'm not going to specify that you need to use eggs. That's implied. So when we talk about taking care of people, remember I asked up front how wide and deep that gets? Because some supervisor has to stop and pause and write that citation away from your normal day job. It takes time. It's an investment in your people. It shows that you care. And we can say we care all we want. Until folks really know that, doesn't mean anything. Our actions need to match our words. Like the old mentor said, your audio needs to match the video. Right? So we can do better. I think communication in the Army just is not good. We'll get after this, another one of those things in top 5 in command climate surveys. Communication, always. We suck. Then we can't figure it out. Just, I don't know why. And in this organization, no, we're very stovepiped, right? I'm not saying anything you don't know. We operate in vacuums. And information that goes straight up and down does not necessarily go lateral where it needs to go. And so the folks who need to know never gets to find out. Then we talk about cops and supporting communities of practice. When we make decisions in those cops that folks who need to know don't know about, like write policies and shove it down our throats to execute just because we can. And then your commanders have no idea the policy exists. So we got to do better at communicating and get the information out there. So what other questions do you guys have? Anybody want me to say hello to John Spellman for him? Can do that. I ask this question and then I get an email when I get on the plane and say, sorry, Major, please say hello to John Spellman for me. Sure, I can do that. So let's recognize some folks then.
We'll get over here so I don't get a whole bunch of squawk feedback through the speaker. Sergeant Major, as we were preparing for your trip, we asked the supervisors, some of our division chiefs, to make recommendations to recognize a couple of people. So we have 2 individuals that we would like to recognize today. And I'm going to ask Danny, if you would, to come up. He'll be the first that we'll recognize. And we're recognizing Danny for, and it's loud, isn't it? You can come right here in the middle. We want to recognize Danny Fischera for the amount of selflessness, devotion, and commitment she has provided, not only to the executive office, but to the entire district, for helping develop district COVID management policy. And at at a personal level, somebody who has served as a district deputy, albeit in a civilian capacity, having somebody there that I can turn to and ask for a sanity check has been a lifesaver. And for me to you, I want to publicly thank you for being there, for being somebody that I could lean on when I have questions as well. But not only are we recognizing her for all of these things, but she was doing this as a supervisor. So she brings that perspective. She brings the employee's perspective to what we're putting into policy, because we want it to work. We want it to make sense. And most of all, we want to take care of each other, because we are a family here, all 850 or so of us. So Danny, on behalf of the leadership, we want to recognize you. So thank you very much.
Let's go stand in front of the flag, so it's a nice, cool photo. So one of the things that we do, and I think everyone's familiar with coins, right? So the Office of the Sergeant Major has a coin. It's not my coin. It belongs to the office. And I believe that as I look around across the room, I think everybody sitting in this room is perhaps deserving of one, right? I just can't do that on every trip. So I ask the teams to identify some folks that we can recognize. But I'd like to talk about the coin a little bit so you understand what you're getting and why. So the castle that I talked about in the regiment, John Spellman being at the top, is this castle right here, right? On the front side, we've got what I'm wearing on my left shoulder, our shoulder sleeve insignia for USACE on the front of it. On the back side are the two arms or legs that I talked about initially. The branch side of 90,000 soldiers, and then the USACE side of about 37,000 employees. And then in the center, the rank of the command sergeant major to signify the office. All right, so that's what the coin is. So on behalf of John Spellman and the entire team, just want to say thank you for what you do and present you with this coin. Do you have a bunch of coins? You have a few? Do you have them on the desk somewhere?
Challenge me. I actually have them at home.
That's okay.
Yeah, from deployment.
Do you have a favorite coin?
I have a chief of engineer's coin.
From John Spellman? Okay. So do you have a favorite coin?
Not yet. Right? That's the correct answer.
This is a new thing. So we're gonna hold it like this because I have to prove I give it to someone.
So we also have one other individual that we'd like to recognize, Sergeant Major Jeremy. We'd like to ask for you to come up here as well. Jeremy, in the last year, or give or take, maybe a few months, he came over to PPMD from Mill Creek, and
1 year this month.
all right, congratulations. Actually, I'm going to ask you to move over here. You're that one everybody needs to see. He came over and he took a job in PPMD, and he has the normal duties of a PM, things that folks are accustomed to. But then he also has some responsibilities for taking care of this building. He has stepped forward, well, maybe voluntold, to take on some additional duties. Other duties as assigned, as the PD might call it. But he is working to develop I guess you call it a master plan for our building, because we own this facility. We're proud of it, and we want to take good care of it. We're good stewards of our building. So Jeremy he's capturing all of the requirements that we have, and that's an ongoing process. He's putting them into our databases. He's programming funding. He is preparing budgets, and he's moving us into the execution phases of renovating this facility and maintaining it for the long term. That is no small feat, in addition to all of the other programs that we are executing, especially as we have $150 million worth of program to execute here in the very near future. So Jeremy, your leadership wants to thank you for taking that on, in addition to what you do every day to help execute the mission for the district.
All right, sir. Appreciate what you're doing. Thanks for this thing. Again, So do we have anybody who's been working for the Department of Army for about 12 months?
For 12 months.
12 months.
12 months.
Anybody in here that's been working for the Army for about 12 months?
Laura?
Okay, so, man, all of a sudden we got all these arms. So how many months?
12 months in a couple weeks,
Okay,
5 months.
okay,
12 months last year.
12 months last week.
12 months, 2 weeks.
Okay, so let's go with the 12 months last week first. Because I've got one of those service things that I want to give to you. I only have one of the bronze. So I do this just so supervisors know that those things really exist. All right? And it's not your fault. I'm not blaming you for not having these things. Because again, you don't know what you don't know. But here's what I can tell you. I've sent an email out at least 25 times with this information to district commanders and district deputies. Because every week I get the same response. Right? So these are available on 2 websites. I'll send the information to you, sir, since I can get on my computer. And so we can get this. It costs between $10 and $12. Well, this is the bronze order, sir. You get to wear it on your lapel pin. So I didn't on your lapel, so you can probably be part of obviously. Right, thank you. Okay, let's do the 10-year drill. 10-year drill. Anybody's been around the Army for 10 years?
Is that county service or not?
No, Department of Army Civilian Service.
Civilian side, not county or prior military.
Nope. Civilian side service.
14 years.
14 years,
10 years in February.
10 years in February, coming in February, right?
Yes, prior.
That's it.
Last February.
10 years last February. Okay. So let's do the 10-year, let's do both of you guys because I can do 2. So, come up. So this is the silver order of the lapel pin. And I'm not going to call an audible on the retirement one because we're recruiting and not trying to get folks to retire. This is how we're going to do this. But thanks for your service. Thanks for everything you guys do. It's actually pretty cool. And we're going to hold it like this. It'll be in the middle to one shot. Good to go?
Yes, there you go, perfect. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. One more, 1, 2, and 3.
All right. But anyways, the gold order of the pin, and it says on the U.S. Army, Department of Army Civilian Retired. That's what it says here. So pretty neat. I'll send the information out to you, sir, so you can get it to the supervisors. There's two vendors authorized to make these things right now, Ira Green and Vanguard, until DLA gets them into the system. So that's what that is. So I appreciate your time. I do have a question though for the team. I ask this question. I try to ask this question because I think it gives context and perspective to a lot of things that we do in the Army. And you probably, based on discussion so far, know where my heart is with this. So here we go. Are you in the Army or do you work for the Army?
For the Army.
Okay, if you're in the Army, hold your hand up. If you work for the Army, hold your hand up. This happens every time. If you're not sure, then put both hands up. Okay. Am I, him, your commander in the back, in the Army or work for the Army? We all agree we're in the Army? So why are we in the Army, but you work majority for the Army?
We don't have PT.
I didn't have PT this morning either. I did. So remember I talked about the engineer regiment at the top with 2 legs and arms, 90,000 soldiers, 37,000 employees on the other side, all tie into that Army organization. What do you think the Army thinks?
We're all in here.
You think the Army thinks you're in the Army? So why am I in the Army, but you're not? Give me some of the reasons why.
We're civilians.
You are a civilian.
You're enlisted.
I am enlisted. What else? I wear a different uniform. Absolutely.
We're not asked to carry a gun.
You're not asked to carry a gun, but you carry it anyways, maybe. Just like I did PT this morning. Don't have a dress code. Well, that's not entirely true. You may not have a dress code, but there are Department of Army civilians who do, based on what they do and where they work at. I gotta get my eyes.
UCMJ.
UCMJ. That does not apply to you. What about Army values, though? Do they apply to you?
Yes.
Do they apply to me?
Yes.
So we can agree on that. So here's what the Army says. There is an Army doctrine publication called The Army. Believe it or not. It's called The Army. It's ADP 1. It says, soldiers and Department of the Army civilians are professionals guided in everything they do by the Army ethic. They are certified and bonded with other Army professionals, through a shared identity of service within a culture of trust. It continues to say, the Army Civilian Corps provides the complementary and reinforcing skills, expertise, and competence required to project, program, support, and sustain the uniform side of the Army. Department of Army civilians also serve in reserve centers. Here's the big one. Like soldiers and members of Congress, they take an oath solemnly swearing that they will support and defend the Constitution. Like their uniformed counterparts, Department of Army civilians leave the Army values and prepare for unforeseen future threats. That's what the Army says. So I'm going to leave it up to you to decide if you're in the Army or you work for the Army. I think, based on that, you're in the Army. The difference between you and me is I'm a soldier and you're not. You're a Department of Army civilian. We're supposed to hold you accountable for your actions the same way we do me. It's a different system and process. You're supposed to live by the Army values just like I'm supposed to do that. Again, the problem is we don't hold you accountable if you violate those Army values necessarily, like we do soldiers. Kind of like our awards and recognition program, that's another part of our organization that's not great. We don't do accountability right. We don't hold folks accountable necessarily for their actions the way we should. And I believe that based on how you see this, you're always going to have a problem if you think you work for the Army when there is an Army requirement that you have to execute. Because if you're not in the Army, then it should not apply to you. I cannot make you do anything that's an Army requirement if you're not in the Army. So when I go to our training regulation, let's use the simple things like, I don't know, EEO training, a sharp that you guys don't like to do. every time that 12-month comes around, I'm there with you on that. Same thing. It's like, man, why do we have to do this again? But I get on the computer and I knock it out. Because I know if I don't, there's somebody who's going to ask me about it. When I look in that regulation to figure out who is supposed to do that training, it says soldiers in that table, Department of Army civilians, and DoD contractors. Now we all have our frequency on when we're supposed to do that. But it's a requirement that you have. It's not a requirement just for me, it's one for you. All right? The question is, do we hold you accountable to it if you don't do it? So there's a lot that tells us we're in the Army. Like John Spellman asked me one day, and let's go back to the COVID thing, right? Remember when we had to fill that form out and put in Meal Connect, whether you were vaccinated or not, or you were requesting an exemption? We had about 9,000 employees that we could not track, that refused to do it, just to fill out the paperwork and put it in the system. And he asked Sergeant Major, why is it so hard to get them to do that? Remember I talked about loyalty and duty? So I said, sir, to be honest with you, for 246 years, we've allowed them to think they're not in the Army. So it's an Army requirement. So it does not apply to them. So context is huge. Understanding who we are is important. And even more important is realizing that the American people hold us to a higher standard, not just soldiers, but you as well, Department of Army civilians. Because folks say, well, Sergeant Major, you serve and I don't. I ask you to think that through one more time. Because any one of these projects that we have out there have strategic implications to them. And you serve every day. We just need to make sure you know that. We don't have those discussions often, but we should. And as it applies to the Army values, if your values prevent you from aligning yourself with the Army values, then you have a conflict. If your own set of core values prevents you from aligning with the Army values, you have a conflict. And Toussaint does not believe, based on that you can be a soldier or Department of Army civilian if your values don't align. Because anytime there is a requirement that comes into the space of those values, you're going to have a conflict. That's what Toussaint thinks. But again, I think the Army thinks you're or says you're in the Army. We need to treat you as such. We need to let you know that. We need to thank you for your service. And thank you for everything that you do on behalf of this nation. It's been an honor. I appreciate your time. There's a whole lot more important things you can be doing. And just want to say thank you again. So I don't know if you have any last.
No, Sergeant Major, your comments are fantastic. Colonel Childers, I know you were able to join us. Okay. Sergeant Major, I hope you enjoy your stay in Walla Walla, and especially as you have the opportunity to get out to our hydropower projects and natural resource offices here throughout the district the rest of this week. Have a great week.
Yeah, I look forward to it.